LWO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
ESPS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, May 4th, and on your screen is a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 3:01 p.m. Eastern Time launch from Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. My name is Shiva Bharadwaj. I'm a space operations engineer, and I'm joining you from our headquarters in Hawthorne, California. And what you're watching a live webcast for our 10th Starlink mission of 2021 and our 26th Starlink mission overall. Now, if you're curious, Starlink is a satellite internet constellation designed and manufactured by SpaceX that can provide high-speed, low-latency internet to people living in remote and rural areas across the globe. To date, over 500,000 people have placed an order or put down a deposit for Starlink. And with every launch, we get closer to connecting more people across the world. Starlink is the world's largest satellite constellation, made possible with the help of our Falcon 9 orbital-class reusable rocket. And today will actually mark SpaceX's 115th launch of a Falcon 9. Now, if you've been following along, it's been a really busy year for us here at SpaceX. So far, we've had 16 launches in 2021, including 3 high-altitude tests of a Starship prototype and a human spaceflight mission to the International Space Station for NASA. Just this past weekend, after spending about 6 months in space, we brought the 4 astronauts of the Crew 1 mission back home to Earth, and a little bit later in the broadcast, we'll be sharing more details about their return flight. Now, just under T-minus 10 minutes to go, all systems are currently go. Why don't we take a closer look at the Falcon 9? You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9. That's our 2-stage rocket. It's over 70 meters tall. That's greater than the wingspan of a 747 aircraft. And for all of you Star Wars fans out there, happy Star Wars Day. If you weren't aware, Falcon 9 was actually named after the Millennium Falcon. Now, Falcon 9 is twice the height of a Millennium Falcon, but that number 9 indicates the number of Merlin 1D engines on the first stage, which is that bottom 2/3 section of the vehicle. With the help of 9 Merlin engines, its objective is to accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere to space, and then it will separate from the rest of the vehicle about 2.5 minutes into flight. From there, it'll make its way back to Earth and target a landing on a recovery vessel named Of Course I Still Love You, which is stationed off the coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, you can tell from the soot on this first stage that it's been to space before. Today will be the 9th flight for this booster, and if we're successful landing Falcon 9, it'll mark the 82nd recovery of an orbital-class rocket. On top of the first stage is our black carbon fiber inner stage. On top of that is Falcon 9's second stage. It has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine that will ignite shortly after the first stage separates. Now, it's the second stage that will carry our stack of Starlink satellites to orbit, and then we'll deploy those satellites just after the T+1 hour mark. Our satellites are safely enclosed inside the 17-foot diameter payload fairing, which is this nose cone structure at the top of the rocket. Its job is to protect the payload from aerothermal loads, heating, and contamination during the ascent phase. Now, once we reach the vacuum of space, we'll jettison the fairing as the second stage continues on to orbit. Today will be the 3rd flight for one of the fairing halves, and the other one is brand new, and we will be attempting to recover each with a contracted recovery vessel named Sheila Bordelon. Quick update on the weather. As you can see, it's a beautiful day at the Cape. Ascent weather is looking fantastic at the pad. Recovery weather is also looking quite good. So with that, vehicle, satellites, weather, range, all looking good for an on-time liftoff just a few minutes from now. Now, if for some reason today during the count, if we're not able to launch, we do have a backup opportunity tomorrow at 2:39 p.m. Eastern Time. As I mentioned earlier, today we are launching from the historic Launch Pad 39A. This is the same launch pad responsible for sending NASA astronauts to the moon in the 1960s, and more recently, helping bring human spaceflight back to the United States after the conclusion of the Space Shuttle program in 2011. Less than 2 weeks ago, SpaceX launched its third human spaceflight mission with a flight-proven booster and Dragon spacecraft from this very pad. This time, we had 4 crew members on board. Those were NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan MacArthur, European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Aki Hoshide. That was the start of the 6-month Crew 2 mission to the International Space Station. And just 8 days later, after spending 167 days in space, the Crew 1 astronauts returned to Earth on Sunday, May 2nd, making their journey the longest duration mission for a U.S. spacecraft since the final Skylab mission in 1974. With NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shannon Walker aboard, as well as JAXA astronaut Soichi Noguchi, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station at 8:35 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Saturday, May 1st. The spacecraft performed a series of departure burns to move away from the orbiting laboratory. You can actually see here those Draco thrusters firing on the Dragon spacecraft. We spent a little bit of time in orbit, and then had an opportunity to come back to Earth. The spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, deployed its 2 drogue chutes and 4 main chutes in preparation for a soft water landing, and upon splashdown, SpaceX quickly recovered Dragon from the water, as well as the Crew 1 astronauts. Now, this was the first nighttime splashdown of a U.S. spacecraft with crew on board since Apollo 8 in 1968. Now, the crew, as you can see, were pretty happy, healthy, and really seemed to enjoy the ride aboard Dragon. It's been a fantastic couple of weeks for the human spaceflight program, and the team here at SpaceX is honored to have been a part of it. Now, we are just at T-minus 5 minutes away from liftoff. Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of its countdown. We're currently awaiting the transporter erector, or TE, retraction. The transporter erector is that structure, the white structure to the left of the vehicle. It provides liquids, gases, and electrical connections to the second stage, as well as air conditioning to the payload. And at about, or just about now, actually, we should start to see the transporter erector beginning its retract process. So first we'll see that clamp that you can see right underneath the payload fairing starting to retract. And then shortly after, the transporter erector will move away from the vertical position to about 2 degrees away from the vertical. Then finally, around T-minus 0, hydraulics will pull away the transporter erector farther from Falcon 9, clearing the way for it to ascend. At this point, the first stage is nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Keep an eye out here for the transporter erector now on the right side of the vehicle. Should start to retract away shortly. Now, super chilled liquid oxygen, which you can actually see some of the gas clouds forming from, that's our propellant oxidizer. It forms those white clouds around the rocket as it comes into contact with the moist Florida atmosphere. We're constantly topping up the propellant in these final minutes until liftoff, and those small oxygen vents overboard form these clouds. There's transporter erector retracting to that 2-degree position. Coming up in about 15 seconds, we should hear a call out for prop loading complete on the first stage.
Strong back lower is closed out.
Then coming up shortly after that will actually be a call out for the second stage completing its prop loading. Expect that call around T-minus 2 minutes. You can see a little bit of the wind there. Still gentle enough for ascent today. Now, after T-minus 2 minutes, the next activity will be at T-minus 60 seconds. That's when Falcon 9 will transition into startup. That's when Falcon 9's internal flight computers will take over the countdown until essentially through the rest of the mission. again, next activity here is prop load closeout on the second stage.
Locks and fuel load is complete.
With that, Falcon 9, from a prop perspective, is ready to go. Team still not working any issues on Falcon 9. That venting you're seeing there is nominal. Again, that's liquid oxygen from the transporter erector. In the lines in the transporter erector that we're venting, and as it comes into contact with the warm Florida atmosphere, turns into a gas and humidify and forms clouds with the humidity in Florida. Coming up, transition into startup. Shortly after, we'll hear the final poll from the launch director, giving their go for launch.
Flight computers in startup.
Falcon 9 Starlink LD is go for launch.
Fantastic news. So with that, launch teams in the vehicle looking healthy, ready to go for launch. T-minus 30 seconds to go. Why don't we listen in to the terminal count
30 seconds.
for Falcon 9 taking our Starlinks to orbit.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff. May the force be with us.
Stage 1 chamber pressures are nominal.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Plus 40 seconds into flight, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from our pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, carrying a stack of Starlink satellites into orbit. Coming up, we have just throttled down for the point of maximum dynamic pressure, or max Q. That's when we experience the highest structural loads on the vehicle. That's from the combination of how fast we're moving through the Earth's atmosphere.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
Increasing our velocity as the density of the atmosphere continues to decrease.
Max Q.
With that, we are through the highest structural loads on the vehicle. Upcoming in about a minute, we'll have 3 events happening back to back. First of those will be main engine cutoff, or MECO. That's where we will shut down all 9 of those Merlin 1D engines to slow down the vehicle in preparation for stage separation. That's the next event where the first and second stages will separate. Stage 1 starting to make its way back down to landing. And stage 2 will continue on with the third event, second engine start number 1, or SES1. That's where the Merlin vacuum engine will ignite and then continue to propel the second stage along with the payload to orbit. You heard the call there for MVAC engine chill. That means we've started flowing a small amount of propellant into the turbo pumps on the Merlin vacuum to prepare it for the full flow of when we perform second engine start. So coming up shortly, about 2.5 minutes into flight, main engine cutoff, followed by stage separation, and then shortly after, second engine start number 1.
Stage separation confirmed.
Left-hand side of your screen, you can see a view from the first stage, interstage, grid fins starting to deploy. Second engine start complete on the right-hand side, that glow of the Merlin vacuum engine. Shortly, we'll see fairing deployment.
Fairing separation confirmed.
View from inside the fairing halves, you can see them separating away from the vehicle. Now, as a reminder, we will be recovering that. Oh, awesome. You can see a view there of one of the fairing halves from going on back to Earth for recovery. As a reminder, we will be attempting to recover both halves with a contracted vessel named Sheila Bordelon. First stage, left-hand side of your screen, grid fins are fully deployed at this point. Those periodic bursts of white gas that you see are from our attitude control system. So the attitude control system giving some small puffs of nitrogen gas, reorienting the stage to get the engines down and the heat shield down for its upcoming events. Second stage burn continuing to look nominal. Now the
acquisition signal Bermuda.
While the second stage is continuing on to orbit, this first stage has a couple of activities in order to make its way back to Earth. First is an entry burn. It'll ignite 3 of its M1D or Merlin 1D engines. And that helps to slow down the vehicle as we start re-entering the upper parts of the Earth's atmosphere. The next event will be just before touchdown on the drone ship. That is a landing burn. We'll ignite just a single center Merlin engine, and that's what will bring the vehicle speed rapidly down to 0 for a soft touchdown on the drone ship. You can see the first stage reorienting on the left-hand side of your screen.
Both stages continue to follow nominal trajectories.
Fantastic news from the navigation officer that we're on our planned trajectories. Now, the first stage is targeting our drone ship named, of course, I Still Love You, which is stationed off the east coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean. We'll view looking out of the inner stage. Not too long ago, we had a second stage engine in there, which is what you see now on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, the grid fins, which are those waffle-like structures that you see around the vehicle, those are more important once we get into the Earth's atmosphere. We use those to guide and direct the first stage towards our drone ship. And so as we start getting more atmospheric pressure and force, as the density of the atmosphere picks up and our altitude drops, those grid fins start to gain control authority and help direct the first stage on its trajectory. Coming up shortly, on the left-hand side of your screen, first stage entry burn. That burn expected to last about 20 seconds. We'll be igniting 3 of the Merlin engines on the first stage to slow down the vehicle in preparation for atmospheric entry.
Stage 1 flight termination system has saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
You can see the plume of the Merlin 1 engines getting pushed back from how fast the stage is moving, rapidly decelerating.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
So successful shutdown of those Merlin 1D.
Continue to follow nominal trajectories.
Successful shutdown of those Merlin 1D engines. Next burn on the first stage will be at just after T plus 8 minutes. That'll be the landing burn start, just a single Merlin engine there. And around the time that the first stage should touch down on our drone ship, the second stage will also conclude its burn with an event called SECO 1, or Secondary Engine Cutoff Number 1.
Stage 1 transonic.
call out there for transonic, meaning that we are starting to pick up speed in the Earth's atmosphere, sort of in that in-between range between subsonic and supersonic, meaning faster, supersonic meaning faster than the speed of sound. Some beautiful views
Stage
of
2 is in terminal guidance.
planet Earth with our second stage Merlin vacuum engine on the right-hand side.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Startup of the landing burn. You can see the drone ship on our screen.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Looks like we're coming right down on target. Now, listen out here for secondary engine cutoff.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
There's a first stage
Expected loss of signal, Cape Canaveral.
on the left-hand side of your screen. 9th recovery for this
Stage
booster.
2 flight termination system has saved.
82nd
Seco.
successful recovery of an orbital class rocket, and Seco called out at the same time, meaning the second stage engine has also shut down. Navigation officer will be doing a check of our
Nominal
trajectory,
parking orbit insertion.
and we are in a nominal orbit. So at that, second stage is going to coast in this orbit for the next about 35 minutes. While that's happening, you can take a look at this animation to see where we are in our coast phase. We'll be coming back here for a very short relight of the second stage engine to get into our payload deployment orbit. That'll be at about T plus 45 minutes. We hope to see you back then.
Acquisition of signal, Newfoundland. Expected loss of signal, Bermuda. Expected loss of signal Newfoundland. Acquisition of signal Goonhilly. Detected loss of signal at Goonhilly. Acquisition of signal, Diego Garcia.
MVAC engine chill.
Welcome back to our Starlink webcast. Now, if you're just joining us, we had a successful liftoff at 3:01 p.m. Eastern Time from pad 39A in Florida. Successfully recovered our first stage for the 9th time, and we're awaiting the relight of our second stage engine for second engine start number 2, coming up just in a couple of seconds. This burn is going to be a very short burn, just 1 second, and that will help raise our apogee and perigee into the payload deployment orbit. So listening out here for the callouts. Hopefully we'll get a shot of the second stage's engine for that ignition. Short pulse you can see on your screen there. Second engine start number 2 and SECO 2. Navigation officer will see how our orbit ended up.
Nominal payload deploy orbit insertion.
Fantastic. So with that, we have another 15 minutes or so to this coast phase before we deploy our Starlink satellites into orbit. Now, during this 15-minute period, the second stage will begin a small spin along its central axis. That's to give those Starlink satellites enough momentum to space themselves out shortly after payload deployment. So while we're getting ready for payload deploy, sit back, enjoy the space tunes, and we'll see you back here at T+1 hour and 3 minutes, 30 seconds for payload deployment.
Expected loss of signal, Diego Garcia. Acquisition signal, Tasmania.
Welcome back to our live webcast for our Starlink mission. And we're close to the end of today's mission. We had an on-time liftoff at 3:01 p.m. Eastern Time, successfully recovered our first stage booster, and our second stage, which you can see on your screen now, had 2 successful ignitions and shutdowns of its Merlin vacuum engine. Coming up shortly, we'll see payload deployment of the Starlink satellites. Now, during the 15 minutes since our last burn, the second stage has picked up a small rotation intentionally to help us separate out the satellites after payload deployment. And once the satellites have separated from the spacecraft, they will continue on with the rest of their mission, ultimately ending up in an operational orbit about 550 kilometers above the Earth. Fantastic shot of the payload separating away with the horizon of planet Earth. So shortly from here, the Starlink satellites will deploy their solar arrays, and then over the next few days and weeks, they'll use their onboard ion thrusters to make their way into an operational orbit. And that's going to bring our webcast coverage to a close. We want to give a big thanks to the Range and the Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's mission. Now, if you're interested in Starlink service, head on over to starlink.com to find out more details. Thank you so much for joining us, and may the 4th be with you.